and welcome to the latest edition of Citrus Bites from our offices in Sevenoaks. Delighted to be joined by a special guest today, so I'm going to introduce her in a moment. So I'm going to canter through the latest economic update, which perhaps I should call the "Are we nearly there yet?" update, which I'm sure brings back terrible memories for those who have been with children on holidays over the last few weeks. But actually, of course, we're talking about how close are we potentially to the top of the interest rate increase cycle. So we've seen, since my last Citrus Bites update, we've seen the 14th consecutive Bank of England base rate increase. What has that done then to inflation? So the most recent results for the year ending July 2023 resulted that CPI, so that's Consumer Price Index, one of the measures for inflation, actually slowed in its level of increase. And again, I'm being careful not to do it's gone down, because nothing's actually going down. It's just going up less quickly. But that change was quite marked. So we saw an increase of 6.8 in the year to July 2023, as opposed to the previous month's report of 7.9. So that was a material change in the CPI level. Potentially good news. But I'm saying potentially why? Because for those of you that follow me on the Citrus Bites edition, you'll know that I regularly talk about core inflation. And I talk about core inflation because it really is the sticky inflation. So it excludes things that are quite volatile, like energy, tobacco, food prices. So those can result in some really significant shifts both up and down on the CPI data. So core inflation is the one I tend to talk about. In the year to July 23, there was no change in the core inflation number at 6.9%. So unlike the CPI data, the core inflation performance is flat. So why is that not moving? Why are we now finding that that's particularly sticky? Again, for those of you that followed some of these editions before, one of the things that I've talked about is around the unemployment numbers. And actually, if you look at the unemployment numbers, and that's the 3 months from April until June 2023, you'll see that unemployment was rising to 4.2%. Now, it's never good, obviously, for those that are impacted by unemployment, but compared to a 30-year pattern, this level of unemployment is still really, really low. So what does that mean? Well, it typically means that consumers they've got money to spend. May not feel like it because of the level of inflation, but they're still able to meet a big chunk of those increases and those bills. And therefore, that's keeping the spending going. But more than that, the unemployment figure is really low on a relative scale. And what that's doing is it's putting pressure on companies who are trying to grow and retain great people. So what are companies doing to try and attract and retain great people? Well, they're having to turn to pay increases in order to do that because of the shortage of labour on the market. And those pay increases are adding more wages, obviously, into consumers' pockets, into the pockets of the employees who then go and spend it. So what do we know about wages? Well, we know that in the April to June period, wages, and this is base wages, but excluding bonuses, increased by 7.8%. And that figure was the largest figure since comparable records began in 2001. So we're still seeing these pay increases as a result of actually kind of in labour shortages available on the market. Now, of course, the real key question with this is, so who pays for those pay increases? Well, typically, of course, it's consumers, because the ability to make those pay increases, to meet employee pay increases, is passed on to consumers through an increase in price in either the products or the services that the company are providing. And so we get this wheel going round of the unemployment level being low, competitive labour market, tight in terms of then really competitive pay rises being made. And so that wheel goes round. So, of course, when that's happening, we're seeing this sticky inflation, this core inflation really start to bed in now. And therefore, so what's likely to happen? The next Bank of England meeting is next month. Have we seen enough yet to see some kind of stability with the Bank of England base rate? Well, a recent poll by Reuters of 63 economists that was made, of those 63, 62 have predicted an increase of 0.25% in the September meeting. So actually the view at the moment is we're not perhaps done with those base rate increases. However, we are finally seeing some positive change. If you're looking for a fixed rate mortgage, perhaps, we're seeing some positive downward change in the fixed rate markets. So over the last few days, there's been a number of major lenders that have announced reductions in the fixed rate mortgage rates available on the market. And that might just be signaling that finally we're getting closer to the end of this base rate increase cycle. So come back again in September, where I'll give you a further update on what we've seen, what the Bank of England announced, and what we're seeing with the inflation data at that time. So enough of the economic data for this month. I'm now delighted to welcome this month's special guest. You may not be aware, but about 6 weeks ago, we at Citrus Financial were delighted to announce our sponsorship of girls football at Chipstead Football Club, a club that's literally based about 30 paces away from our offices. Today, I'm delighted to welcome Sarah Batters as my guest. Sarah is the former commercial director at Southampton FC, responsible for growing audience and creating revenue for the men's and women's teams, and also a coach for Chipstead FC, under sevens and under 9 girls teams, and also a mum of 2 girls that play football. Sarah, thank you so much for joining me today, and welcome. This feels like a fantastic time to be talking about the progress in girls and women's football at all levels. So perhaps a question just to start us off with is, obviously with your experiences, it would be great to hear more about the change in attitude and commitment towards the girls and women's game that you've experienced over the last few years.
Thanks, Richard, and thanks for having me. I'm always happy to talk about the growth of women and girls football. So yeah, as you mentioned, I was at Southampton managing the commercial side for the men's and the women's game, and that means that I was there over the period when our Lionesses won the Euros, which just had such a massive impact on both the participation in girls football, but also how many people are watching and starting to follow, or just at least starting to give women's football a try and see, you know, is it for them? And I think we've seen, obviously, with the World Cup, some record broadcast figures of how many people are watching the women's game. But what's so important is that trickles down through to participation. A lot of the women that you see now playing for the Lionesses, when they started playing football, it was still a case of the one girl on the boys' team, or you know, having to go and find somewhere that they felt welcome, that they could play. And you know, I speak to those girls, and it's so important for them that we start creating grassroots teams and places that girls can thrive at football, because they are different when they start playing. The under 9s team that you're sponsoring, they love a cartwheel, which is not something that the boys necessarily do in the middle of football. But you know, it's all about making a fun environment for girls to try football, and then also making sure that they can see and they can follow, you know, professional women football players and see where they can actually take it. So it's a privilege for me to be involved at kind of both levels of the game, and the professional game, and then also getting my hands dirty in the grassroots game.
Thank you. And I guess it was interesting listening to you talking about audiences, because I was just looking at some of the numbers before, in advance of today. And obviously kind of the FIFA World Cup, huge success, big shout out to the Lionesses. But what struck me is the stadium crowds apparently hit over 1.9 million, which was about 50% higher than the previous record, which actually I think was something like 2015. So it just feels like a staggering increase in the level of interest. And so I guess for me, you know, what did you make of that when you see those crowds? Is it everything you expected, or actually do you feel it's actually just the start? Are we literally on the start of the journey now to something that's going to become more and more successful and more prominent?
Yeah, those crowd numbers are brilliant, and you know what what we saw at the Euros as well, and it's great to see for big tournament competitions those kind of crowds. But what we need to do is increase how many people go and watch their local team. So In the WSL, the top league of women's football, you've really got the top 4 teams there: Man City, Arsenal, Chelsea, and United, kind of racing away a little bit with their attendances. And I think, Arsenal sold out their stadium for one of the women's games this season, or last season, I should say. But then the Championship, which is the level below, the second tier of women's football, that's where Southampton was. And, we put a real concerted effort into growing the audience. And we managed to, at Southampton, get the biggest audience across the Championship, across the season. But that was still only 3,000 people. And that was a huge success for us, because we took it from 400 people on average the season before to 3,000. But if you think 3,000 people in the context of a 30,000 seat stadium, still a long way to go. And I know I've been to, local teams to us, like Palace. We took some of the Chipstead girls there last year, and the attendances for those games are about 1,800. And this is really where we need to grow, so that we kind of grow that whole pyramid. So anyone that's listening to that podcast, I'd really recommend you get out to watch your local Championship or WSL teams. And, in this area of Kent, you've got London City Lionesses, they're in Dartford, you've got Charlton, and you've got Crystal Palace, and then a bit further south, but not too far, Lewis, who are all within kind of 45 minutes to go out and watch really high quality women's football for, you probably pay £1 or £2 to go as well. So that's where we need to go out and watch and kind of grow those crowds. It creates then that pathway for girls to progress in their football.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I guess thinking about the pathway, Sarah, if we take it all the way back to grassroots, how many girls teams are there at Chipstead?
So at Chipstead, we started, Chipstead a few years ago with the Wildcats programme. So the Wildcats is a programme that the FA provide for girls under the age of, I think it's 8, to basically play non-competitive football. And we started with a Wildcats group, and out of that group over the last couple of years, we've now got an under 10s team, an under 9s team, under 8s, and then combined under 7s and under 6s. And then we have some older girls teams as well, the under 12s and under 16s, I think. But yeah, we've gone from we started with about 20 girls from reception up to year 3, and now we've kind of got 3 or 4 teams. And our under 9s team is now full, waiting list. Same with the under 8s, but the under 6s and under 7s, there's more places for more girls wanted to come and join us.
Fabulous. Okay, that's terrific growth. And great to know there's space as well for others that want to join. And I guess, do you get the sense that so much has come from the Lionesses, again, their successes, and therefore the interest in the girls' game has grown so much that you're now seeing this interest? Is that really what's driving more of that local awareness about the opportunities in girls' football?
Yeah, exactly. But it's seeing the Lionesses and their success. And it's also seeing, those individual athletes as well. And, quite a few of the girls that come, they go and watch their teams at Chelsea and Arsenal and, go and start idolising those. My girls are funny because, they grow up in football, and every time I take them to a game, they say, "Mummy, are we watching girls or boys?" And if I say boys, they go, "Oh." They only want to watch girls football now. It's what they relate to. So there's that. I think the other thing that helps the growth is the opening up of options to participate. So, when my eldest started playing football, went to try it, she joined one of the other clubs within the 7/8 areas, but it was a mixed team. And, it didn't really suit her being in a mixed team. I'd say about boys football, 2 things. One is that by nature, a little bit rougher. Right? Not all boys, of course, but just in general. And then the other one is, I think boys grow up playing football in the back garden more. So just naturally slightly 1 or 2 steps ahead to my daughter anyway, who'd never played. And so and at that time, there were no girls teams in the 7X area. So I was really happy when we found Chipstead. It was actually the first one we found that was going to offer girls football. So it gave her an opportunity to go and try it. And, you know, having those options, I think, is what's, you know, growing it, the opportunities to participate. But yeah, what they can see. My daughters laugh at me because I did an interview once on TV and I said, if you can see it, you can be it, which is true. But now they always say, well, mummy, I can see a carrot. So I don't know if it's landed entirely with my children, but, you know, it is important.
And did you encourage both of your girls to go into football? Or is it something that they just saw and they saw some, you know, they saw the success and they decided that it's something they wanted to go and do?
I'd say of my oldest, I encouraged it. I think it's really important for kids to grow up playing a team sport. And, you know, given we were watching and around football all the time, it made sense. My youngest saw her sister playing. She wanted to play immediately. So, you know, she actually started playing when she was still, you know, 4. And she immediately wanted to start playing. So, you know, that was a bit of seeing her big sister play. And, you know, I've just actually signed up a girl this morning who wants to play because her big sister plays. So we start seeing that happening.
And so I guess it's really interesting listening to you because I get the sense that, you know, the girls' teams you know, the women's teams are thriving at an international and professional level. At grassroots level, clearly things are really ramping up now. But I'm guessing that brings another set of challenges for clubs like Chipstead. So what are those challenges at a grassroots level for clubs?
So one of the biggest challenges is coaches, and quality of coaches. There is something to be said for there's a real benefit for girls to have some female coaches in terms of role models, etc. And there's a real lack of female coaches. And in fact, I'll do a plug for them, but the FA at the moment are sponsoring women to go and get their introduction into coaching badges. People can apply on the FA website if they're interested in becoming a grassroots coach. So availability of coaches that want to coach girls football, and that's the biggest challenge really. And then, you know, clubs also have the logistics around a grassroots football club are very complicated, and Chipstead's a good example about how many boys teams there are, and, you know, pitches and space, and, you know, you're adding in an extra element to that. So you have to have clubs that are open to doing that and making sure that the girls aren't, you know, second rate citizens. I'd like to have a better phrase, but the girls are treated and have as much opportunity as the boys teams, and making sure that that's something that runs through the whole club.
And if somebody is interested in coaching a role within the girls' games, then you talked about the FA on their recruitment drive. Is that something they need some kind of background skill to be able to do? Or literally, if they're watching this, think, you know what, that's something I'm really interested in getting involved with. Literally go to the website, the FA website, and go from there.
Yeah, that's exactly it. You can go to the FA website, do the introduction. Well, start with the Playmakers course, and then the Introduction to Football course, which costs £160, and that's what the FA will waive for women wanting to become coaches. I'm in the middle of doing that myself, and a lot of coaches at Chipstead, and they start as parents and then go through those courses so that you have got all the skills that you need to be able to run coaching sessions. We've also obviously got our amazing mentor coach in GM who teaches us a thing or two.
Brilliant, thank you. And so if anyone, I guess, watching today, you know, typically, you know, maybe daughters, granddaughters, keen to get them involved, what would your advice to them be?
Yeah, just go and try it. Just go and get in contact with a club. Come to Chipstead or another club and go and try it. So, you know, we offer new girls a 2-3 week trial, and yeah, get out there. Wrap up warm. That is one thing about football, is it's not played in the friendly in the friendly weather, but we allow our girls to wear as many coats as they want, and layers. But yeah, and they get out and try it, and just go and see about having fun. And that's what we focus on in the first few years, about having fun. And I laugh because I had to ask one of the more senior coaches to come and help us in one of the sessions coming up because we're short. And he said to me, does that mean I need to play the animal games? And it's like, yes, we do, because that's what we do when they're 6 and 7 years old. It's about getting them familiar with ball skills in fun ways.
Sarah, listen, thank you so much. We're probably timed out at this point, and I feel like I could spend so much more time. So maybe if you wouldn't mind, it'd be great to have you back again in the future, because we'll probably get some questions in from viewers actually that I'd love to be able to put you in the future. So it's a massive thank you and a massive well done by the sounds of it as well, because it's great to hear about what is happening locally with girls football at Chipstead and your involvement to making that happen. So thank you. And I guess what you don't escape from, however, is my monthly question. So you get the benefit of the question that was set by last month's guest before you get the chance to ask the question for next month's guest. So for last month, the question was, if you were starting in your career now, isn't hindsight a wonderful thing? What's the one piece of advice you would give yourself?
So I was thinking about this earlier, and it's talk to people, meet people. Don't stay in your team or your group. Just get out and meet people. I'm doing a lot of that at the moment, meeting people across all different sports. And it's amazing. Every single conversation you have, you get something from. And, you know, I think while I'm in the middle of changing roles at the moment, I'm talking to people that I met right at the beginning of my career. And I think it's just one of those most important things, is just to talk to people outside of your professional circle. So that'd be my advice.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. And then lastly, your opportunity to set the question for next month's guest.
So I wanted to have a bit of fun with this and keep it on the topic of football. So I hope the next guest appreciates it, but I want to know if they think, who will be the first England team to win the World Cup, the men's team or the women's team?
Oh, brilliant. Love it. Thank you so much. Great question. Can't wait to hear the person answer it and get their views. Sarah, we really appreciate it. Thank you so much for joining us today and for all the information you've shared as well. Brilliant. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.